submissions made, and they replied to it in the first instance today, maybe for half an hour or so. And then we hear from the stakeholders who are present or any who sent in written questions. And we will then have them speak, and then National Treasury replies to that. So that takes in all about an hour and a half, maybe at most. And then the remaining hour and a half is allocated. Nobody needs to mute their mics in Kulileko. And then the remaining 1.5 hours up to 12 o'clock will be discussion from colleagues and whoever wants to speak. Okay, so firstly, the National Treasury team, will you start, please? Who's going to lead the National Treasury team?
Thank you.
There we are. Okay. About 20 minutes to half an hour. Okay, half an hour perhaps.
Yes, thank you. Edgar Sish is going to the DDG, acting DDG budget office. He's going to start. Thank you very much.
Okay, over to you, Edgar.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. I will go through quickly as we obviously have time constraints. This is just a list of the organizations that made submissions for the public hearings. I do want to indicate to members that we, from time to time, do receive submissions also directly as Treasury. So the list may be actually longer than this in terms of the overall tips and suggestions that come from people throughout the length and breadth of the country. But this is the list to which we are we're responding in terms of the considerations for these.
Just to explain,
yes,
if it has been submitted to Parliament, we don't respond to it. It's a matter between the executive and the stakeholder. We can only deal with, unless you get the permission to submit it to us and you can include it, but we've never had this experience before. So only, unfortunately, respond to those who came to the hearings or made written submissions. Thank you.
Yeah. No, we will be responding only to these, Chair. I was just making the observation that from time to time.
Oh, yes. No, of course. No, we understand. Yes, thank you.
Okay, very quickly. So just we've tried to kind of summarize some of the issues. Some of the main comments are firstly related to economic growth and the economic reform agenda of government. There were a number of points, including useful points made around the credibility of macroeconomic and fiscal projections, the need for implementation of the government's reconstruction and recovery plan, the issue of infrastructure. Then a second sort of group of comments were around really tax issues. These included raising taxes on the higher income individuals in the country, various other tax levies, including taxes, replacing the income tax with the land tax and so on and so forth. We considered that. Then thirdly, there were expenditure-related contributions, including as it relates to the implications of the spending reductions on service delivery. We noted Michael Sachs made an extensive commentary in that regard, as well as various comments on how the different spheres of government will be able to absorb them, particularly provinces and municipalities. We also took note of the zero-based budgeting questions, as well as with respect to the wage bill, and broader matters around achieving savings in government.
Sorry about that, Edgar. In Kulileko, can you help there Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And then fourthly, there were some fiscal policy observations and some different views on the fiscal policy stance were expressed. And then finally, various other matters were raised, including as it relates to SOCs, the proposal for the allocation to South African Airways for business rescue, as well as other matters affecting municipalities. On the matter of economic growth, just to answer the question around, which was raised by, in particular, the Parliamentary Budget Office about the credibility of our growth forecast. This table shows the growth forecasts that are currently out there around the world, both by private and official. Okay, both by private and official institutions. And as you can see, we don't consider that our forecasting work is out of line with much of the global consensus. Yes, this year we are slightly, not a lot, just slightly more optimistic than some of our peers, with the exception of the World Bank, which is more optimistic than us, in fact, with respect to this year. But for next year, we consider that our growth forecast is very much within the band of the overall consensus. We don't see ourselves as being anywhere near too optimistic in that regard. Indeed, we actually, if you average out these numbers, you'll find that we're actually slightly on the lower end in terms of the optimism. So I think this indicates just the broad spectrum of projections and what we consider is not an overly optimistic set of projections at all for this economy. And so with respect to what that means for the fiscal matrices, and because obviously this is sort of the foundation of a lot of our fiscal work, we consider that our fiscal numbers, because they're based on these types of projections, are fairly solid. The next sort of set of points we want to deal with is around the taxes, the revenue and tax proposal. Here, Mr. Chairman and honorable members, it's a little bit awkward because, as you know, we do not make tax proposals or indicate tax proposals in the MTBPS. So we would plead with our stakeholders and partners to understand that while we answer these questions to the best that we can, the tax proposals are reserved for the February budget because they're implemented with the view of the start of the tax year, which of course is the end of February. Now, we've noted the proposals, and they are listed there. I'm not going to read them for the sake of time, except to say that I can assure honorable members and colleagues that we spend a lot of time in the Treasury looking through the different possibilities on the revenue. We've done quite a lot of work, and we continue to do quite a bit of work in this regard, including on both direct taxes as it relates to income tax and the corporate tax, and we do a lot of work in respect of wealth taxes, which of course would include taxes on land. This is work that we do from time to time. And from time to time, we engage with different people in different forums in this regard. We do have a plan to increase taxes in the 2021 budget, marginally. We're not in a position, as I said at the beginning, to announce where those will come from. We will obviously announce that in February. You don't want to generally announce things until we tax lawyers and tax planners will start gaming the system. But we do have marginal tax increases and we have engaged different stakeholders on our options for taxation, as well as the limitations on taxes that we have, given the fact that the economy is still fairly weak and the recovery next year is quite uneven. We indicated in February that we would look, for instance, at various areas of how to close loopholes on non-resident taxes and so forth. So that would be my indication at this point in respect of that. On the question around, or the broad set of questions around the issue of South Africa's fiscal position and debt, we do understand that there is obviously concern both in Parliament and out there in the public around the action that we're taking to address public debt, government's debt. And we ourselves in the National Treasury, I think the fact that we moderated the active scenario compared to June to now is an indication of ongoing debate and discussion in the Treasury and with other partners on the issue of how to address and the speed with which we need to address the public debt situation. But Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the principal issue, that the foundational point from which we are coming can't be ignored. And that point is this, that South Africa's debt situation and fiscal matrices are substantially weakened and were weak before the COVID pandemic broke out in the current economic crisis. We entered this crisis very differently from how we entered the 2008 crisis, where we had budget surpluses and we had an economy that was growing. We were one of only two emerging market economies to enter the COVID crisis in recession. And in addition to that, our fiscal position was substantially weak. And in that regard, our debt situation, as you can see on the right-hand side, was quite significant in comparison to other emerging market countries. We had a debt buildup that is substantially worse. And so we can't get away from this fundamental point that we are, if we don't do anything, on a path to a sovereign debt crisis. We've had a debt buildup that far outstrips our partners. It's also important, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, to also remember, and as I pivot to the question around austerity versus stimulus, we do understand that while there are specific parts of the budget where some departments or some institutions may have experienced reductions in their budget allocation, the overall fiscal stance of South Africa has not been one of austerity. That has not been the case. And if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, it shows on average the primary balance, in other words, the difference between non-interest expenditure and the revenue of government over a 10-year period compared with other countries. As you can see, South Africa has over a 10-year period been in negative territory. In other words, our fiscal stance has been expansionary, not contractionary. And this is important for members and colleagues to, I guess, to internalize for two reasons. The first one is the obvious point, which is that we have been building up an unsustainable stock of debt for a very long time. That's number one, and that needs to be addressed. The second thing that's important in this regard is that when you consider the issue of stimulus, you have to ask the question, well, if you are in a high debt situation, if the solution to that, as has been suggested by COSATU, the BJC and others, is to spend more, in other words, build up even more debt, the question is, if you were already increasing debt over a 10-year period and you did not get economic growth from doing that, why will doing that over the next period cause economic growth to come? So for us, this is an important question that needs to be considered, is that South Africa has been spending more than inflation, more than economic growth, and South Africa has been building up debt for a very long time. But that spending and that debt buildup has not led to economic growth. Why will it do so this time? Another thing that's important is to note the fact that there are consequences to the weakening of fiscal matrices and to the buildup of debt. And one of the big ones, of course, is the issue of interest payments. When you borrow money, you have to pay interest on it. And South Africa's debt service costs have become a major crowding out, have had a major crowding out effect and continue to do so on important social spending and economic investment of the government. Debt service costs are approaching 5% of GDP. So that's 5% of GDP that we could be spending on other things. And now what we're doing is we're transferring that money from taxpayers' pockets to bondholders, both here and abroad. And for us as the Treasury, what we would put to the committee and to our partners and our stakeholders and the public is, this is not a sustainable way to run fiscal policy. To transfer the country's wealth to bondholders, domestic and abroad, is not a way that we would, that we believe South Africa's fiscal policy should be run. And we're trying to address that, because if we allow it to continue, you will have debt service costs getting to 7, 8, 10% of GDP, which we have seen in other countries. Another point to mention is the fact that the issue of state-owned companies, as well as the infrastructure investment. If you look at the proposal we're making in this MTBPS, honorable members, honorable chair, we are making a proposal that's designed to try and shift the composition of spending from consumption, which is dominated by compensation of government employees, towards investment spending, towards public infrastructure, because we believe that this is important for supporting the economy. But at the same time, the issue of the deterioration in the government balance sheet is something that we are quite concerned about, including as it relates to state-owned companies and the municipalities who are struggling financially. Now, we believe that we have to take a broader approach to this and not just narrow the thinking to the fiscus, that everything has to be about the fiscus, the fiscus, the fiscus. The fiscus can't carry the load of all of these financial and balance sheet problems in the overall state. Issues such as the failure to raise revenue is important. The fact that some state-owned companies, Eskom, Sunral, etc., for whatever reason, are not getting the revenue that should be coming to them, is important. It's not just about the fiscus fixing that problem. Indeed, the fiscus is itself in a precarious position. And the same is true for municipalities in respect of raising revenue within their own context, and also addressing some of the weaknesses in financial management in that regard. We consider overall that options to stabilize the fiscus have become increasingly limited, and that we have to take action if we are to avoid a distress episode and a crisis. Just moving on then to the issue of fiscal multipliers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, except to say that our position on fiscal multipliers, in other words, the contribution to growth that additional government spending makes, which we call fiscal multipliers, is that fiscal multipliers have been significantly weakened, primarily because we have built up so much debt, we've got such a heavy interest load, that the benefit of additional government spending is counteracted on the other side by the debt and the cost of that debt. And in addition to that, we also have had a problem with composition of expenditure. So those are the two problems that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve the problem of the unsustainable debt burden and the costs associated with it, which extract from economic activity, including by raising country risk premia and the cost of capital. And the second thing we're trying to solve is a problem of poor composition of expenditure, where we're spending too much on consumption and not enough on investment in the economy. Now, we do understand, and Professor Sachs was extensive in his description in this regard, that the reductions are substantial and they're unprecedented. We understand that, and we are aware of the risks in this regard. However, it is important to also indicate to honorable members that we consider that these spending reductions and the overall need to close the fiscal gap is about us having a conversation as a country and as government, and we've started doing this and we've presented numerous options to cabinet, about the structure, the effectiveness and affordability of government programs. And this is an honest conversation we need to have as a country about the various subsidies that we have in place, the various funding mixes, the way that we have made decisions on the delivery of housing and so on and so forth. In other words, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, it's not just about trying to find savings here and there by making the system just a little bit more efficient over there and over here. It's about the overall structure of government and about whether or not the decisions that we've made, including decisions we've made a long time ago, need to be recalibrated, and different delivery methods are required in order to change the structure and to achieve the kinds of savings that we need. So these are things that we're considering, and we have made extensive and continue to make extensive representations to NEDLEC, to Cabinet and other structures. And of course, we raise this matter here as well. I also want to address the issue about, which was raised in particular by the Budget Justice Coalition, with respect to the orientation of our budget. The term I think that was used was a human rights budget. I think we need to also be reminded of where South Africa's spending priorities actually are, and where they will remain going forward. South Africa is a country that spends very well and a significant amount on the social wage. Our largest spending items in South Africa, unlike in numerous countries around the world, are not in things like defense or in things like various kinds of scientific exploration. When we're not spending billions and billions on a space program like the US. It's an extreme example, but I'm trying to make a point to say that we spend most of our money on the social wage as a government. Spending priorities in South Africa are very much geared towards learning and culture, social development, and so forth. And so it's important when we think about what we're trying to do to try and fix the fiscal gap, that we don't forget the fact that our baseline situation as a government is one of a government that spends a significant amount on the social wage and will continue to do so. I've already mentioned the fact that we're proposing to shift the composition of spending from consumption towards investment, and this is what we're proposing in this medium-term budget policy statement, because we want to support the economy, and we also want to improve the effectiveness of government spending towards economic development. We also want to indicate that we are very much alive to the issue of waste and improving the efficiency of the operation of the state. It's an important issue, but it's not an easy issue. I do want to indicate that we must be clear as well about what kinds of monies we are talking about here. Our colleagues at COSATU often mention 100 billion wasted according to the Auditor General. The Auditor General's report, however, is more nuanced than that. What the Auditor General says is that over the last few years, we've had about R1 billion. It's come down to about 840 million in fruitless and wasteful expenditure in certainly national government. The rest is composed of mainly what we call irregular expenditure. Irregular expenditure may very well be corruption, and in many cases it can be, but in some cases it's because of a lack of proper internal controls in arriving at a spending item. So you can have that item arrive, and the spending can be appropriate in terms of the item, but there's certain regulations that weren't followed, and that's ticked off as irregular expenditure. And that adds up to the big number that we often talk about. So I think we need to manage our expectations about what we can get from waste in government quite carefully, because quite a bit of that money is not necessarily that we've spent money on the wrong things or that the money has been stolen. Some of it is because of administrative irregularities, which when resolved will not cause that money to suddenly appear. It just means that it will improve the internal controls in the system. But that being said, we are not in any way trying to say that the issue of corruption and waste is not important. It is something that is very important. And both in our procurement proposals, as well as the work that we're doing to take into account the public comments on the public procurement bill. We are very much focused on doing that, on addressing those leakages and addressing corruption and waste. And in addition to that, we have been running since June a set of spending reviews, which will culminate in the implementation of the zero-based budgeting. And of course, in zero-based budgeting, every program must come and justify every time why it needs to receive the resources that it has received in the past or that it is asking for. And it has to prove the efficiencies in that regard. And so we consider that we have a systematic approach to addressing this problem. A part of what we're trying to do to improve the quality of spending, as I've said, is around zero-based budgeting. And what zero-based budgeting would allow us to do is to address the overemphasis on incremental change to annual budgets. So even in conversations in Parliament, sometimes what happens is that we all talk about growth rates, and we fall too much into the trap of thinking that a growth rate is an indication of whether or not something is working. And I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, that's fine, but we need to move the conversation a little bit in a different direction. The rest of the elements, I think I've already spoken to in the presentation. Chair, as I go to a close, I do want to indicate our views on the public sector wage bill, which I know Kasatu understandably has raised on numerous occasions, including in this current round of public hearings. It's important that we also have a sense of context about the public wage bill in South Africa. If you look at the graph on the left-hand side, you can see how the trends have gone. The maroon bar, the sort of maroon reddish bar, is the percentage change in compensation of public sector employees. The light gray bar is the growth of the economy. As you can see, we have shifted over the years from a situation where public servants would receive a compensation increase that's a little bit less than economic growth, to a situation where now the public servants receive an increase in their salaries that very noticeably outstrips economic growth. And this has been happening certainly for the last 15 years, at least. We have been in this trend. So it's important to understand that when we talk about our proposals on the wage bill, which is effectively a wage freeze, and when we talk about our proposals for the current round, we don't miss the historical reality and the current reality, which is that public servants have been for many years been receiving increases that have outstripped the overall growth of the economy. Indeed, they have received increases that have outstripped the overall increase in prices in the economy. And so this differential in pace is part of the challenge, where we've now ended up this year with a public sector wage bill out of a non-interest spending budget of just under 1.6 trillion, 637 billion of that is being spent on the salaries of and wages of public servants. Remuneration for public servants tends to be higher now than it is in private sector. Some data shows, for instance, that starting salaries in the public sector are higher than starting salaries in the private sector. More than 95% of public servants now earn more than the bottom 50% of all the registered taxpayers in this country. It's also important to understand this in the context that one of the points that have been made, and one of the questions that were asked by members during this week, was around the risk. If you freeze salaries, it was asked, in the public service, won't you lose people? People will leave. We will lose skilled people. Honorable Chair, honorable members, the short answer is No, we don't think so. We don't think that that's the case, because it's more likely that if somebody is earning a median income in the public service right now, or indeed if they're getting a starting salary in the public service right now, if they leave and go to the private sector, they'll probably be paid less. So the economic incentives aren't really there for people to leave. We don't consider that that will happen. Indeed, we consider that in the current economy, which has experienced significant weakness, as you know, and where we have seen private sector workers take pay cuts, in some cases substantial pay cuts, we don't see that there is an economic incentive for public sector workers, skilled public sector workers, to leave and go into the private sector. Some of them, of course, may get a higher salary, but we consider that a lot of them may actually not get the salary that they're currently getting, together with the benefits in the private sector. Chair, this is just a reflection of where we've gone with the different levels in the public sector. I'm not going to talk to this in much detail, except to say that it just shows where the majority of the public servants are, which is in that sort of maroon bar in the middle, but it also shows how the levels have gone up in terms of the rank of the average public servant over the years. Just in closing, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, what we're proposing, we understand, is not easy, but we consider that it needs to be thought of within the context of the economic and fiscal challenges that we are facing. The economic challenges that we are facing are very clear, particularly in the private sector. Weaknesses in investment, weaknesses in production have led to a situation where people are negotiating, and in some cases voluntarily taking pay cuts and making sacrifices in order to retain jobs, and making sacrifices in order to keep businesses alive. We consider that we as government need to take a really hard look at ourselves, based on the information that I've just shared about the fiscal position that we're in. It's not always appropriate to make these kinds of comparisons, but if you were running a company and it had the kind of numbers that we have at the moment, you would make very different types of decisions than some of the decisions that we've made in the past. And that is what we're appealing to. Now, of course, we have not implemented the third year of the 2018 wage agreement. We understand the issues in this regard. DG can talk to it just now. But again, we consider that while the matter is going to the court, we are engaging with labor unions to try and find a solution, because we believe that a solution can be found. And we think that that solution needs to take into account what I've just said about the macro fiscal situation, which is very serious, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. We have also issued a set of guidelines on the proposed wage freeze. And that guideline, Honorable Members, extends, or rather we have had an extended guideline that also has a wage freeze for the next 3 years for public entities as well. So we haven't just limited this to government department employees in national and provinces, but we also have extended it to the broader public sector, including the various entities. We are working on different options, including how we make reforms to allowances and various other things in order to address the unsustainable situation in respect to the wage bill. Honorable Chair, I will end there. I don't know if my DG wants to say anything, but that really is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shishi. Obviously, many of the things you say can be contested by members, but can I thank you for the clarity with which you present your responses. They're very simply and clearly done, and I thank you for that. Obviously, members will have different views on what you said, and they'll come back on that in a moment. But can we have the DG? Do you want to say anything, DG?
No, no, Chair, I'm okay. Thank you very much.
Fine. Then can we move to Kusa? Can we go in the sequence that you appeared in the hearings on Wednesday? And Kulileka, will you help me with that? And with anybody who raises their hands. But for now, can we just go? Is anybody here? Matthew, you here from Kusatu? I don't see your name on that list of participants, but maybe I missed you. Are you here, Matthew?
Yes, I'm here, Comrade Chair.
Okay, go for it.
Sure. No, thanks, Chair. And I think thanks to the colleagues from Treasury.
About up to 5 minutes each, okay? To be fair to everybody. Thank you. And I'll monitor you, obviously. Yeah.
Sure. Look, I just think on the public procurement issue, Chair, we're very worried that Treasury plans to take another 2 years to finalize that bill and to get it enacted. We don't think we can wait until 2023 for it to come into effect, given the crisis and the looting and the dysfunctionality of public procurement. We would really want to hope to see a simple online open platform, which is accessible to everybody, which encapsulates the entire state, not just the public service departments, but also includes SOEs, entities, looks at certain central procurement of certain large scale items, and also has a strong local content aspect to it. So we're worried we're not getting that right, Comrade Chair. Chair, for us, what we see as a fundamental crisis and the cause of the fiscal challenges facing the state, which the MTBPS focuses on, we see the four critical issues, which you don't think the MTBPS has tackled. One is that it is not our figures, it's the Auditor General who says on average every year, about 10% of our budget is lost, not just to wasteful or irregular expenditure, but corruption, Comrade Chair. Go to the Zondo Commission, the estimate says that we lost about 500 billion rand. Now, we don't see any new provisions, proposals in the MTBPS about how to deal with corruption. We've tabled proposals, COSATU and NADLAC. Government has been very loath to agree to them about how to deal with corruption. We've yet to see any official or politician being held liable under the Auditing Amendment Act. So, Chair, no matter how much we think with everything else, if we don't address the holes in the state, then we're just moving chairs. We had really had hoped to hear clear roadmaps for the SOEs, which are a burden to the fiscus. We didn't see that. Our approach, Chair, also about SARS. SARS has bled significantly during the era of state capture, yet we haven't seen any new proposals about tackling tax evasion, but more especially, Comrade Chair, the fact that only 5% of customs enforcement takes place for goods entering the ports. We haven't seen any new proposals there, but we do appreciate the new commission of SARS, who we think is trying his level best. But Chair, look, our difference with Treasury, we understand the debt issue. We don't disagree with that. It's not a debate for us. But our thing is, how do we manage the right sequence and the balanced approach? Do you simply cut expenditure, fixate on the wage bill, which Treasury we feel is doing, and government? Or do we get a balanced approach which says, let's save jobs in companies, let's stimulate the economy in a non-reckless way, and if you can save those jobs in companies, they can continue to contribute towards taxes, towards the economy's recovery, and thus help the state to stabilize. While simultaneously, Chair, you focus on SARS capacity, corruption, stabilizing the SOEs, etc. All we really get, Comrade Chair, is that the cause of everything is the public service wages. We must slash them. And there are some inaccuracies in the report, Chair. It says that it's higher than the private sector. Yes, because in the public sector, you don't have farm workers or domestic workers. You have doctors and nurses and teachers, police officers, skilled types of workers. So let's compare apples to apples. Chair, I'm a bit concerned that Treasury feels there will be no consequence to freezing the wages of nurses and doctors and teachers, that they won't leave. That's not true. Check any Sunday newspapers, you'll see constant adverts from Canada, New Zealand, Saudi, Dubai, poaching our nurses and doctors and teachers. There's a constant flood of them leaving. And we're seeing as a consequence, a huge impact upon service delivery, the higher learner-teacher ratios, one nurse performing the job of 6 nurses, doctors working 48 hours. We're seeing the impact upon the police service personnel levels. Chair, we really hoped for Treasury to understand that some public servants, a police constable earning 186,000 Rand a year, can't afford to go 4 years with no wage increase. Yes, politicians, management, the SOEs, they can afford it, but the lower middle income earners, Chair, they can't. And we feel we are simply outsourcing the bill for corruption and mismanagement onto those workers because they are low-hanging fruits. Chair, we think as a bottom line, government has to go and engage the unions of the PSCBC. They've been telling everybody they are engaging, yet there's been no formal tabling of a proposal at the PSCBC. Chair, we think that if government is serious and wants to create political capital, They need to immediately cut what ministers and MECs and mayors earn. They need to implement the public service cap what management can earn upon the entities and SOEs where they have huge wages for management. But equally, Chair, it's difficult to understand how serious is government when just this week Parliament and government approved an increase for the gender commissioners. So it's difficult. You're saying one thing to nurses, but for management, we're saying a different story. Chair, look around for us around the austerity and stimulus, and I'll get to the end, Comrade Chair. It's not just us who say we need to have a balanced, nuanced approach. The Presidential Economic Advisory Council is saying the same thing. And we really had hoped to hear more from government about how to stimulate the economy. The loan guarantee scheme, basically Treasury is walking away from it. Only 8% after almost 8 months has been dispersed. There are no new proposals from government or the banks to fix it. The UIF has injected 51 billion rand in the economy, but we're having to fight with government to honor the commitment to extend that for those workers who can't come to the party. We really hope to hear a package of additional economic or financial relief to companies which are battling, and that could look at tax relief for those companies which remain closed or under restricted operations. What can the banks bring to the party, and what could the UF bring to the party? I think, Chair, the last issue, I mean, for us, Chair, it really is about corruption. I don't know why colleagues in government are so reluctant to tackle this pandemic of corruption, Chair. We have made proposals about that politicians and their families can't do business with the state, a transparent online procurement system, the seizing of stolen assets, etc. Government seems very reluctant. In fact, Chair, government has shown almost no appetite to freezing the stolen assets. So there's a really contradiction message, and it's difficult for us as COSATU to convince public servants to accept compromises, etc., which they do want to do, especially for the next 3-year wage agreement, when they will just tell us, but look, your friends in the ruling party and government, they're not acting according to what they preach. There's a huge contradiction, Chair. But I think, Chair, let me stop there. I think my 5 minutes has elapsed. Thanks, Chair.
It was closer to 6, but I mean, it's a ballpark figure because it's an engagement. Can I just ask, though, there's some very good points and very good questions you raised, Matthew, but can I ask colleagues, it's Saika next, and ideally you should challenge, where you disagree with National Treasury, challenge them so that the committee can also get a better sense of what your concerns are, instead of repeating what you said on Wednesday. The idea is to engage with them. And Matthew did, but some of the issues are a repeat of, with due respect, Comrade Matthew, Wednesday. So Sharon, over to you. Can you engage with them rather than repeat what you said on Wednesday? Otherwise, to respond to you, Matthew, will take them at least another hour and a half. So if you can isolate key points, but you got your 5 minutes or thereabouts, Sharon.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Edgar, for that presentation. I've got a list of questions, basically, so I don't know if that's engaging, but I'd like a response to some of those questions that were, and the concerns.
Yes, that's engaging, yes.
Yeah, thank you. All these questions basically stem from our submission. You did address the growth rate, so thank you for that. I think it is still a little bit optimistic, and at this stage, considering where we are and where we've come from, I would rather be conservative than optimistic at this stage. So that's just our suggestion. Let's rather be conservative. Once we are back on track and be optimistic again. But let's rather base our budgets on conservative estimates rather than optimistic estimates. If we look at the public sector compensation, which is our big problem that is causing all these budget deficits that we're sitting with. I have a question is 40% of the public sector cuts will be coming from learning and culture, health and peace, and security functions. Our question is, why is it coming from the sections? As Mr. Park said, we have nurses and doctors working hard and we don't have enough of them. Why are we cutting in that specific space? Or is it going to be at the higher levels where there's no value add? So we'd like a little bit more detail on why is it in those critical areas that you actually are cutting caution. The next one relates to the actual expenditure of the wage bill. Yes, you're saying it is going to decrease, but ultimately, if we look at the expenditure year on year, that is still increasing. And we're not going to get to surpluses if we don't cut the actual expenditure. So the rate at which is increasing is declining, but it's still increasing year on year, and we need to in check. So I'd like to find out if there was mention made of a comprehensive public sector remuneration strategy that was going to be developed for the medium to long term. I still want to find out how is this going to ensure that reduced wages are not going to impact reliable service delivery. So it's critical that we do establish that. If we move on to the other question regarding the wages, is you're relying on the 3-year wage freeze and the court ruling being favorable. Has an alternative plan B been considered in the budget? For instance, 38 billion rand for the current year that is sitting in court. That if you lose, where is that additional expenditure going to be cut? We'd like a little bit of more details on that. Also, the remaining 3-year wage, what happens if it doesn't work? For instance, I've heard already in your documents, you're saying some of the municipalities have already implemented wage increases based on, you know, the agreement for this year. So how are we stopping that from happening? Because it's already carrying on despite what you're saying. So what are you doing to prevent that from happening, to make sure that we do keep the wages in line? We'd also like to know when you and the trade unions are going to collaborate to start implementing an effective, transparent productivity enhancement plan to ensure that there is accountability at all levels. And that's a board in government and the SOEs and municipalities, etc. We need to get and work on this to reduce this, because as Mr. Parks was saying, there are people that are doing really significant, playing significant roles in our economy and helping on the ground level, yet they are not surviving on a daily basis. We look at that and adjust those and get rid of the top. And SAICA did do an analysis of the wage bill, and we presented that in February. And just to give you some highlights of there, we gave some suggestions where the wages can be cut, and it definitely does start at the top level. If we move on to the SOEs, a great concern there as well, the expenditure, why we keep spending there on things that are not meeting our long-term policies is beyond us. One of our highlighted concerns is the road accident fund. Currently, it's sitting with a 593 billion rand deficit that government might have to fit the bill for. So we'd like to, how are you planning for these potential contingent liabilities and other contingent liabilities resulting from these SOEs? What are you, you know, as Mr. Parks says, the corruption happening there, it's not happening. We're not seeing the arrests and that kind of thing happening quick enough. We need to get the MPK going to ensure that we root that out and recover some of that money from those that actually took the money from these SOEs. We're having these commissions, but we're not seeing any fruitful. We have started hearing about it, so it is encouraging, and we thank the MPA for that, but we really would like Parliament and Treasury to put their weight behind that to get that going to recover some of that money.
Can you start rounding up, Sharon, please?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I move on to the municipalities. For me, this is, you know, the budget is transferring more and more money to the municipalities, and we agree it's on the ground that the people need these services being delivered to them. Yet 8% of these municipalities have a clean audit. It's mind-boggling. How can we then be transferring more money to municipalities functional and the money just disappears? So what I'd like to find out, what is Kochta's and National Treasury's plan to fix these municipalities? Because this has not been something that has been happening over the short term. It's been happening consistently over the long term.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Yeah, round up, please.
Okay. Yeah. And then it was also made of a rigorous monitoring regime to strengthen local government finances that to be implemented. We'd just like further clarity on when that actually will be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Outer, please. Obviously, a lot of issues that are being raised by the two previous people, well, certainly the second questioner, speaker, is dealing with appropriations, but you know, the two are interrelated, the fiscal framework and appropriations. But ultimate decisions will be made by this committee on appropriations. It will be done through the appropriations bill and the committee concerned. Okay, are you there, Outer?
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead, please. You've got 5 minutes or thereabouts. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll go straight to questions. I'm wondering what National Treasury is willing to do to ensure that wasteful and corrupt expenditure is not going to be prioritized when we come to zero-based budgeting time. And there's mention of expenditure reviews, which we strongly agree with. And I'd like to say, just in general, the presentation and the principles conveyed in it, we strongly agree with. And I think many of them need to be intensified significantly for it to have the desired effect. We've had similar shifts over the past few years. We know we haven't been in an austerity budget. Of course, we haven't. We've been increasing our debt. So we do believe that some of these moves need to be much stronger. So who will carry out these expenditure reviews? Who will set those benchmarks? Having observed a lot of this sort of oversight in Parliament, it's always the same people who are actually responsible, the same authorities, executive and accounting, who come and account for the issues that they've caused, and they are supposed to be the solution. That obviously doesn't work. So what would National Treasury do there? And the suggestion that irregular expenditure is okay, we do not accept. Government cannot expect taxpayers to comply with increased rates of taxation of any kind until we really know that there is compliance with the PFMA, with the MFMA. Of course, taxpayers would not like to comply if those spending money do not comply. So we strongly agree that government structure needs to fundamentally change, but who will change it? And when will that happen? I think we all agree that that needs to happen, that government has failed in its current structure. And looking at municipalities and SOEs in particular, their funding model obviously is not working. So who is going to take responsibility for that, and when? When it comes to the wage bill, we would like to ask whether Treasury can endorse a differential approach that considers performance and income bands. I think that would alleviate many of the problems raised by some of the other stakeholders. But that would probably require labor law reform, and surely this committee and others in Parliament can contribute to that. And what about NEDLAC? We argued that it is an adequate forum, that it is dominated by political alliances. What is National Treasury's opinion about that? Then what is National Treasury's view in general on politicians doing business with the state? Should there be a reform there? We most certainly think there should. And what about political domination of fiscal policy in South Africa? And taxpayers have virtually no voice in those forums. How can we change that? We very much like to see that change. On the public procurement bill, we really believe it also should be expedited, but it also must address the issue of access to information, which in its current form and in its draft form, it does not address adequately. And again, corrupt accounting and executive authorities cannot be tasked with expenditure reviews. How can Parliament in its budget review and recommendation reports work together with provinces and National Treasury to really do the work that needs to be done in terms of expenditure reviews, as opposed to those actually responsible for wasting money? And then we would suggest that money allocated to SAA and other SOEs, as we've seen this pattern over the past years, the discourse and this engagement, Chairperson, is very positive, and we can almost see it's politically correct. So we welcome it. But when we actually look at the numbers, it's not the same story. Money is going to SAA. Wouldn't that money be better spent on the NPA and SARS, who have lost capacity due to state capture over the past 10 years? And it's called recapitalization, but surely something like the rail sector would be better to recapitalize than an airline, which only serves high-ranking public servants. No one really wants to fly SAA, and they probably won't. And finally, just a suggestion to National Treasury, when it comes to the asset forfeiture unit and the proceeds of corruption, perhaps that could also help finance the actual solution in terms of the MPA, the Zondo Commission, and others that are really, really expensive. Thanks, Chair. That's it.
Thank you. I certainly would fly SAA. So on that one, you're wrong. And I'm sure, no doubt, others will too. But that's a separate story from the point you're making, presumably. All right, next, please.
Thank you,
You
Chair.
know who you are. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So on the GDP, thank you to Edgar for indicating. So he focused a lot on the GDP going forward in the next 2 or 3 years. Our big worry is the consistent overestimation of GDP during the previous 10 years, which led to revenue over forecast, etc. So for us, we definitely agree with the point also raised by Saika that at this stage, we urge Treasury to rather take a caution approach or a cautionary approach rather than being optimistic, to make sure that at least we rather underestimate and over-deliver than the opposite, as what we have been seeing the last 10 years. Then the other point I would like to make is on South Africa's debt. And I would like to ask Treasury, do we actually have a debt reduction plan in place? So a lot have been said about stabilizing debt. A lot have been said about servicing debt services costs. My question is, going forward, it seems to me we are in the snowball situation where the debt is just rising, and we would actually like to see plans for debt to be actually not only stabilized, but how are we going to bring these levels down? Because otherwise, my children and their children are still going to be paying off our current debt. Chair, and then if I may, I'm going to give over to my colleague in the Fiscal Cliff Study Group, Prof. Rousseau, who also have one or two questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Joubert. Chair, I want to ask whether any feedback has yet been received from the Office of the President, from the Presidency, on the Fiscal Cliff Study Group's earlier proposals that the government at all levels, including Cabinet, should only procure vehicles manufactured in South Africa, hence stimulating South African manufacture. Secondly, I just have to make the remark that the Fiscal Cliff Study Group has been warning about the civil service wage bill growth since 2014. So we don't quite understand that there's surprise now that we are in trouble. We've foreseen this trouble in 2014, and we've been very vocal about the unsustainability of the civil service wage bill since 2014. And it's as if people now respond with surprise that we are in this position. We've been warning about this all along. So we don't understand the surprise, and therefore action must now be taken. Lastly, on slide 4 of the National Treasury, an indication of tax increases up to the 23-24 budget period has been given. If I remember well, it's 5 billion, 10 billion, 10 billion, and 15 billion respectively over this 4-year period for tax increases. We need to understand whether these are nominal or real numbers, whether they take inflation into account. And secondly, if these are the envisaged tax numbers, there must be huge freezes and huge cuts coming in expenditure to contain the debt growth projected in the MTBPS. We would want to know where these cuts will be made, which expenditure items will be frozen, or else these tax figures given can just not work. We just cannot balance the situation with these numbers. So where will the cuts be made? Give us more information, please. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Gila, you're next. Thank you.
Good morning.
Is Gila, yeah. Yes, my brother.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to all committee members, select committee members, and the Standing Committee on Finance members, and all civil society organizations. We acknowledge and appreciate the response with regard to the HPL, the Health Promotion Levy or Sugar Drinks Tax. We believe the tax is well targeted. Looking at the bleak picture, of the tax revenue and the fiscals, we believe there is an opportunity to consider in the next financial year in the overall tax increases that HPL be considered. So what I wanted to put to the Treasury presenter, the Deputy DG, if I've got the title right, is in terms of the overall, we welcome also that there is a thinking for an overall tax increases. overall tax increases for the next financial year. Would HPL also be one of the things that they would be considering to increase in terms of of our call for 20%, as well as the expansion of the tax into the fruit juices? So I think that comes as a question in terms of the overall thinking around increases on tax. Is Treasury looking at considering the HPL expansion and increase in terms of the next financial year um, budget? We also believe, Chair, in terms of the overall, rising epidemic of the NCDs, that the health promotion revenue, it's needed more than ever, so that we can have preventative, measures to ensure that we prevent non-communicable diseases. During COVID, we saw many people that fell ill and succumbed to the to COVID-19 had underlying conditions of non-communicable disease such as diabetes, hypertension, and the rest, and other non-communicable diseases. So we believe that this revenue will be critical. It's needed more than ever. As South Africa will need to also look at making sure that the health promotion programs are needed and are funded to ensure that we prevent the scourge and the tide of non-communicable diseases. So I think those are the submissions. And I think maybe lastly, in terms of we have a chance again in terms of the social expenditure, but overall in terms of funding health and the health reform, that this is one of the good basket that we could look at in terms of the expansion of HPL. We can see the picture doesn't look good in terms of fiscal and the tax revenue. It looks bleak. So we're thinking that some of the health promotion levy money, if we have stronger collection and more increase and expansion, can go towards funding the national health insurance and other health reforms, other progressive health reforms that the country is thinking about and pushing the policy towards. So those would be my submission. I think the question that I wanted to put again is the one that relates to, will HPL be considered in terms of the overall tax increases in the next year budget? Thank you, Chair.
Of course, members will respond, but I said this to you on Wednesday. The majority in this committee are very, very empathetic what you say, but what can and can't be done is another matter. But thank you for that. Then we have Mr. Peter Meekin finally. Thank you, Mr. Meekin. In Kulileko, is Mr. Meekin connected at the moment?
Yes, Chair. Yes, he's connected.
Ah, can you help him?
I've unmuted him. Mr. Meekin.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead, Mr. Meekin.
Okay, good morning and to the Select Committee and the Chairman. Look, I've been sitting here now for about 4 or 5 hours, Monday and today, and I think you've got an enormous problem with this tax business. It's like an old car. It's reached the end of its road. And so I want to just ask 2 questions there, which might help you to trade this one in and get a nice electric car from Tesla in a tax system. Look, the first question is this. We sit here, when I go out and I buy 1,000 rands worth of goods, sorry, 1,300 rands worth of goods, it's Pick and Pay or wherever I go, that can actually be sold to me for 1,000 rand. But because the taxes are 28%, it costs me 1,300. So if you get rid of income taxes, you'd save 1,000 rand, and Mr. Parks his members would be 1,000, well, that multiple richer. Okay, so you say, well, hold on. How am I going to pay? I've still got to pay my taxes, which which is now, I think, 1.14 trillion. Where is that going to come from if it's not coming from things that I buy? Well, it comes from the value in the land. It comes from the things like a bit like rates and taxes. When you get rid of income taxes, you'll have to increase your rates and taxes to pay for that shortfall. Now, if you increase your rates and taxes, and by the way, I mean only rates and taxes on land, then the land values are going to fall. Okay, the land values are what the state creates, because it doesn't tax land now. So therefore, the land values fall, and therefore you're even richer, because your bond goes down, your bond payments go down. So there's the dilemma that I think you're facing. And so out of this, I can ask why it was that the minister in 2008 said he saw the inefficiencies in the income tax system, and he was on record as saying he wants to he wants to do away with all income taxes, like I'm saying, and he wants to adopt land taxes, as I'm saying. Now, he hasn't done that, and I'd like to know why he hasn't done that, because it would make it a lot easier and solve a lot of other problems as well. One of the problems is that, as my table attached to my submission shows, there's a great deal of money being spent in the budget only because you're not collecting money from land taxes. I wrote down, I'm not going to go into the table, but I'd like somebody to let me know either today or sometime in the future, where have I gone wrong here in this table? And the table is just to say, if income taxes weren't being paid here, then you wouldn't have these items in the budget. Now, that amount I've taken is 670 billion rand a year. Okay, it involves a couple of other things as well. But I'd like to know, I'd like somebody to tell me, I've had this table I've tabled this table twice now. I'd like somebody to let me know what was wrong, because this I think Mr. Mboweni knew in 2018. He knew that we were spending far too much in these items. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meakin. Can we hand over now to Treasury? The time now is 10:09, so if you can finish in 20 minutes or so. Secondly, may I suggest...
Sorry, Chair, can PDO respond, please?
Well, this is surprising. Respond to who?
Sorry, they referred to our presentation as well.
Oh, right.
And there
Okay,
were some issues.
yeah. Okay, but you're an in-house structure, so can you be quicker, because we have other forums to deal with them. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to start, Honorable Chair, there's an argument that government spending increases over the past few years hasn't led to growth. And so why would we expect more growth with government spending in the future? And this is linked to the idea, where National Treasury keeps equating fiscal deficits with a fiscal expansion, and definitions of austerity aren't just linked to where you spend less. It's actually where government spending is inadequate, or where government is, even if it is increasing spending, but are making cuts, and that increases rates of unemployment. And there's several other definitions. But the argument that, if if government is going to spend more and it's not going to have better outcomes because in the past it didn't happen. That's like, you know, the father in a household who goes out drinking as soon as he gets his wages, coming home and saying, see, we're spending more money, but we're not getting better outcomes. And we shouldn't be spending more money on food and other things in the future. You know, it's just a really poor argument, I believe, and considered. And also this repeated, I think, misdefinition of fiscal expansion needs to be considered. And linked to that, this issue of the multiplier. And as I think PBO has said several times, you know, there are reasons why overall the fiscal plier may be small in certain areas, but we should see it as a forward-looking policy variable. There are specific areas where government spending will have a huge socioeconomic impact. It will improve people's lives and it will increase aggregate demand and have big impacts on the economy. And the issue is about planning and doing that well and targeting. And so this discussion about the multiplier, I mean, I think people are getting tired of it and it's sort of to and fro and we're talking past each other, but we should actually think about how government effectively spends and where, and there are definitely places in the economy where it can spend, where we'll actually see big positive impacts on people's lives, health, and on growth. The other issue I just want to raise is the arguing that government shouldn't be spending more and we can't increase debt, but fiscal consolidation has been an important constraint on economic growth and is one of the reasons why our debt to GDP levels have increased. And so that kind of historical context is left out of the story. And I think we need to look at the numerator and the denominator and the fact that if we are going to borrow more, it needs to be done in the way I suggested in targeted places where the multiplier effects will be largely positive for GDP growth. And to keep moving towards fiscal consolidation when it hasn't worked over a long period and has been a constraint on growth, I think is the wrong way to go. And also on then the option is to say that government can't do everything and that there should be structural reforms, and that sort of has a tone deafness with regard to the current state of the economy for business and the private sector and also households. And that trying to implement structural reforms, even if it's done well and implemented quickly and as a quick response, which is unlikely, you know, in the current environment, we're not going to see the kind of positive response and incentives and growth from the structural reforms. The last issue is, you know, there was a lot of focus on GDP and GDP projections and how everybody has the same projections, and we keep having this discussion over and over. Both the FFC and PBO raise the issues about all the prerequisites, including successful outcomes of the court case on wages and the issues in the bargaining council that need to be met before the kind of projections for the MTF will come to pass. And so this raises serious risks to the fiscal policy framework projected. Thank you very much for the time, Chair.
No, sorry. It's very good you spoke, Saraj, because you're presenting an alternative perspective, which is necessary for the committee to hear. So perhaps we can also ask the FFC, because they're here. At some stage, the chairs need to meet and discuss this and take it to the committee. That when it comes to the FFC and PBO, they're not civil society stakeholders as such, but they have very important roles to play. So they're both statutory. So I think, you know, also many of the issues being raised here are appropriations issues. And we'll discuss with Sifiso and Dikeledi, Siraj, in fairness, Gigi. The debate between PBO and Treasury can't be left hanging in there. It keeps coming up. You're talking past each other. The members in our committee, even from within the same party, have different perspectives on it. and we need to find a way of addressing it. Otherwise, we keep going around in circles. Also, may I take this opportunity while I'm speaking about this? Treasury, can you reply to Mr. Meekin? He keeps coming in, raising the same issues. You keep ignoring him. Reply to his questions, particularly his point about 2080. Did the minister say that? And why did, if so, why did he detract from that? And reply to his table in writing. Obviously, DG, you cannot reply to all. It will take you hours to do it, and we mustn't crowd out the time that the members need to engage. So, FFC, are you here? So you can have your quick 5 minutes, and then we're moving on. FFC, do you want to say anything? But we need to treat the FFC and PBO differently, and most of the issues are appropriation. So FFC, you can speak quickly now, and then you can take the issues forward. We will speak to Sifiso and Dikaleri, the two chairs of the committees concerned, appropriations. Are you here, FFC?
Chair, I didn't see FFC here today.
Good, shall we move on? Not good, but I mean, can we do this in Nkululeko? Speak to Alan, I'll speak to Joe, and we'll speak to the other two chairs, that many of these issues have to be carried over into appropriations. PBO and FFC must be treated separately from civil society stakeholders. Having said that, DG, over to you. We need to manage the time. I think 20 minutes is fine. And remember, you can put the answers in writing. We will take some of the issues up in the report. And secondly, that, you know, we look at a forum where these exchanges can take place so we can resolve these issues. And thirdly, of course, in Nkululeko, Alan, you must send to all the stakeholders whose questions have been raised here or comments been made, you must send to them the writing responses you get for those not addressed in this meeting. I would suggest, DG, you pick up the common issues along the 5 or 6 inputs, so that you don't respond to every specific matter, and those matters you do respond to, because this is Parliament. We want to see also your replies, that we have it all, preferably by Monday, so that when we finalize the report, we've also got your full replies. If possible, we'd like to have it tomorrow afternoon, because the committee chairs and the research unit start putting together the report over the weekend. Thank you. Over to you, TG.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and all members, for the opportunity to respond to most of the questions. Certainly, Chair, we will do that. We'll make sure that where possible, we respond in writing to various members. I know in terms of Mr. Meekin, for instance, in 2018, we did respond on the issues he's raising, and we've got a slide to that effect. But however, we will certainly make sure that we respond to him directly. But just more 2 general points, and then Edgar and the team members and Mr. Momoniat is also on the call. He will come in. Just generally on the points that I think we are making, because that is quite right. I think on the debt, they agree with us that the debt is unsustainable. It's okay, but it's how we manage the sequence and the right sequence. I think, Matthew, you've been saying this over and over again, but I think it's important what you're saying. We recognize that for us, it remains balancing the jobs, ensuring, and the story behind trying to balance what we are doing and with what you're saying. Our response lies in growing the economy, in ensuring that we implement the recovery plan that we all agreed to. So that, for me, I think is quite critical and important, in that we are able to balance, to have this balanced view that you're talking about. Secondly, I think we are equally concerned with SARS, and obviously we have to, from a tax administration point of view and the capacity thereof, something that we closely look into, including obviously making sure that SARS performs, and that's something that obviously we are agreeing. But yeah, and broadly on the roadmap, I think the roadmap, we are trying to try as much as we can to articulate this. We will not have it completely right in terms of addressing all of the issues of the medium-term budget policy statement. The medium-term budget policy statement does not attempt to answer all what the ills that are there in the government system. But however, what we are trying to do is to be pointed in terms of budget-related matters that will address, and it's a policy statement that begins to paint what we most likely will say in February. And as much as we say that for tax matters, we don't be too articulate now, but we give an indicative, and we confirm some of the broad indications that we want to give at this point in time. So can I ask, Chair, through your permission, to ask Edgar to come in, and I also ask Mr. Momoniat, and I know Mr. Duncan Peters is also on the call, to come in. Edgar, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank
Chair,
you.
before we do that, may I raise?
Yeah, Dennis, what is it?
Thanks, Chairperson. Just in terms of the DG's response there, he said that he's going to reply to Mr. Meekin directly. I think that that's inappropriate. Mr. Meekin has made a presentation to influence policy.
No, what he means is, the reply we sent him directly, but we'll also get it, obviously. In fact, he says they did do that. So that's what he means. Yes. No, you're right. Okay. He has no choice anyway. The DG can't mean anything else. Okay, you're right, Dennis. Let's move on. Agreed.
Thanks, Chair. So just to go through really quickly, given time constraints on the question. So I think broadly on the growth estimates, the principle of being conservative on our growth estimates is something that we accept. We understand that as a fiscal authority, I think both SAICA and the Fiscal Cliff Study Group would understand this because it's the case around the world. As a fiscal authority, you do have to balance between just bare bones conservatism on the one hand, and on the other hand, considering what the possible impact of current government policy will be, because you're part of the government. And so I think that you have to be able to answer to that, and that has to feed through to some extent in your baseline. So I do think that there's a balancing act that's required in that regard. So that would be my I guess, simple, almost technical reply to that. The principle around our growth estimates and how we do it is something that we engage with different people in different parties. And we know, for instance, that the Parliamentary Budget Office this year, and Duncan Peterson can speak to this, Parliamentary Budget Office earlier this year did an assessment of our growth forecasting process. Notwithstanding what the outcome actually is, the actual process, at least our interpretation of their report was that the process they thought was fairly robust. So, this is something that we're constantly working on, these forecasts. Of course, this year, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we are experiencing an unprecedented crisis, an extraordinary event, which has put all of the forecasting models, whoever is doing them, including of the institutions that are here, under a great test. And so we'll continue working on them. We do that on a continuous basis. On the questions that were asked, there were several questions asked on COE, particularly by SAICA. Let me start by indicating and being frank in saying that due to the fact that this is something that we are in discussion with labor unions, both COSATU and non-COSATU labor unions, I think I'm not going to speak here about the alternatives that we are considering, because that would be, I think, inappropriate given the fact that those are negotiations that are ongoing. And so I would plead for some patience in that regard. What I will say is that we've been working for some time with the DPSA. It's unfortunately, I will admit that the process has not always moved fully to completion. It's been in fits and starts, and we're strengthening it now. In fact, we're having discussions right now with the DPSA on this, on the issue of addressing productivity throughout the, not addressing productivity, but thinking about a productivity tool in the public service. That's something that we've been in conversations with for some time, and we agree that that is important. I mean, the issue of the contingent liabilities, if you look at some of these numbers, depending on what you are talking about, we've had instances where some contingent liabilities have realized, some risks have materialized. and we have been able to deal with them within the fiscal framework, where, you know, whether you're talking about the land bank, as you saw in the supplementary budget review, and of course, you know, other things that were in the budget review in February. Some of the big ones that that SAICA was referring to, such as the Road Accident Fund, those numbers are huge. Those are big numbers. Those are not things that can be considered, in our view, in the context of saying, you know, reprioritizing spending, etc. Those require significant policy action to be taken to address them. So they're a bit of a different kind of problem, in our view, than a fiscal framework problem, because those numbers are just too huge to talk about them in the same way that you would talk about, for instance, guaranteed debt for something like the land bank. So that's what I would say in that regard. On municipalities, I don't want to go into the details of the various work that we're doing, including work that we're doing with COCTA on municipal finance improvement, on addressing the audit issues, as well as some of the issues that we have raised publicly and openly about challenges in municipalities around leadership. There is a lot of work that the cooperative governance department is doing, including on the district development model, in order to improve the effectiveness of our local governments. And I would be perfectly happy to outline all of those things. We've got long documents in that regard that we can send both to the committee and to SAICA, including as it relates to how we are contributing to the improvements in the audit outcomes of municipalities and the challenges in that regard that need to be resolved. We just moving on then to Mr. Meekin's questions. I'll leave most of that to Mr. Momonia to deal with. Just from my side to say that I think on the one hand, we agree with the broad statement that we need to focus, and we have said this ourselves, on expanding the tax base, that simply trying to squeeze more by increasing rates is not a sustainable option. You need to expand the base, and the way that you expand the base, of course, in the main is by what Kosatu was talking about, which is growing the economy and things along those lines. So we agree with that broad statement, but I'll leave the issue of the specific land tax issue to Ms. Momonia. Let me just close on my side by going through just a couple of really quick ones. Feedback from the presidency on the purchasing of vehicles locally. We'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not able to give any specific information on that. The tax numbers that are reflected in slide 4, yes, those are nominal numbers that are there. And finally, we take note of the there's an issue around the credit guarantee scheme. Oh yes, I'll leave that also to Momo to deal with. So I think, Chair, I think from my side I'll stop there, and Mr. Momonia is here, and Mr. Peterson, Dr. Peterson is also here to answer any further questions on the growth, economic growth side. Thank you.
Ismail, go for it, please.
No, thanks, Chair. Chair, I mean, I think as the point has been made by Edgar and the DG and others, you know, we don't make tax policy proposals in this MTBPS, and hence, even the announcements that are there, I mean, like Edgar says, they're pretty, you know, small numbers in terms of the additional revenue and so on. So we've got to wait till February. I think the broader point is right that, you know, perhaps we need to look at when the risks are all downwards, be more cautious in how we then budget both sides, revenue and expenditure. And that's something which we clearly need to take into account because there's no room for error. Chair, I think on the specific proposals that are made, I mean, I think with Mr. Meeken's proposal on the land tax, I admire Mr. Meeken for his persistence. But frankly, and I don't think we also want to waste everyone's time, we really differ fundamentally with what he's proposing. His proposal is actually like a tax revolution and would have huge consequences on the budget. There'll be huge transitional problems. And to the extent that it can be considered technically, it has, the Davis Tax Committee has looked at the land tax. It's not accepted his proposal. And I'm not sure why he feels that there was any acceptance of his proposal in 2018. If you could just bring that to our attention, which statement does he believe said that the Treasury is considering moving in that direction? It certainly has not. Certainly, we see a land tax have its place and may well be part of a wealth tax proposal. But the revenue you generate is nothing compared to what we get from VAT, from personal income tax, and so on. So yes, we'll engage more on it, like we engage on all proposals. But I don't want anyone to have any illusion that we're considering such a massive change. And to the extent that that's there, then it should be referred to a tax commission to go into the nitty-gritties. It's not a small proposal. With regard to some of the proposals on the health promotion levies, yes, I mean, everyone is free to put proposals for the February budget, whether it's Mr. Meeken or the health lobbies, either way. We'll look at all those proposals. Now's the time to submit to the extent that you feel that there are proposals that we should consider for February. We'll do that. On the loan guarantee, Chair, I think my good friend Matthew Parks, I think, has heard us say many times that there are limits within the loan guarantee. And, there are 2 or 3 points that should be taken into account. If you look at the total relief given by the banking sector, it really is, around, I don't have the exact figure on hand, but say late 50s or 60 billion mark. We can provide the latest figure to Parliament in our written response. But we must bear in mind that yes, there's about 16 billion of that that's from the loan guarantee. The figure of 200 billion was not something that came from the banks, and let's be clear, the banks are putting up their own money. They take their first loss. Yes, there's an underlying guarantee, and we as Treasury can't afford, or as a country, to have all 200 billion taken up as a guarantee. It's only a very small proportion that's there, and we hope that really the call on that guarantee is minimal, to the extent that we want to look at other mechanisms, because businesses themselves are reluctant. I mean, we have a demand problem that businesses themselves do not want to take on more debt. And so let's be clear, even if we were to relax more of the conditions or criteria, it's not clear that people want to take up debt. And to the extent that it's not debt we're talking about, but actual grants and so on, I think that's a different conversation to have. This scheme is not the one then to deal with it. I think I've answered all questions. Thank you, Chair.
Hello. Yes, well, you haven't answered all questions, but you've responded to the broad themes. And the questions that were very specific, you'll answer, as will your team, led by the DG, in the next 24, 48 hours. DG, do you want to say anything? Anybody else on the National Treasury team before we hand over to members? Is anybody else? No, DG?
No, thanks, Chair. I think we are fine.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously there are very specific issues raised, right? And I have quite a few as well, but I'll come in at the end. Nkolo, the co-chair, in the absence of Joe, is actually in an awkward situation, and she's going to be connecting properly with us. She's connected to us, but she wants a clearer signal, and she'll be able to get that in about 10 minutes. So I was meant to step down to make way for her to chair this part of it, but I'll continue. So I'll have to, in Kuleko, have we got questions now? Dennis Wright has raised something in the chat group. I think we agree with that. May I also remind Dennis and others that a lot of the issues raised do not belong to this committee. I know it's difficult, colleagues from civil society, this complex system we have, but there are very sensible reasons for it because of huge loads. So remember, fiscal framework issues are dealt with in the fiscal framework report, appropriations, expenditure, spending, allocations, etc., by the appropriations committees in Parliament, which meet as soon as we finish the fiscal framework, though of course the two are very interrelated. So let me deal with what I want to say as a chairperson and then hand over to members, and I'll come in on my own views. Firstly, on the matter of this the car saga, as I call it, fiscal study group, fiscal club study group, there's nothing further I can do, regrettably. It's quite shameful, actually, that 4 years later the presidency hasn't replied despite my prodding. The matter was handed over to the NA committee chair, and I'll follow up on that. But can we then urge the researchers, because we cannot allow the presidency or anybody not to reply. May I remind members, and those who don't know this, who won't know it because they only came in late, I have written letters to the president and indeed Edgar, to your minister at the time. I have also engaged with Gerard Konov about 8 times, and Joe has taken over, and I don't know if anybody from the NA committee can help us. But in our report, we should repeat that we now want a reply, but we also want a reply from the minister. I can imagine the minister's response. I don't want to speak for him, but he's very likely to be empathetic. For what it's worth, I'm very clear. The majority of us in the ANC also agreed with you, Professor Rousseau. That wasn't the issue. And I think even now, more than ever, colleagues, with COVID-19, the answer must be given to that question. Secondly, I think that we cannot continue having this debate between Mr. Meekin and National Treasury. I think Mr. Momonyat and the DG must just write a letter to him and CC to us, so we don't keep having this discussion, in a roundabout fashion. Having said that, the issues I want to raise, I'll deal with later at the end. Dr. Ola will join us in about 5 minutes. So who's the first person, apart from Mr. Ryder, who wants to raise an issue in Kuleko? According to my list here, there's nobody. Let me look at the chat section.
There's still no one, Chair.
Oh dear. Right. There's nobody's hand up either. Is there anybody who wants to comment?
No one, Chair.
This is unacceptable, members. We have a public here before us. We've got a dialogue going, and we have to listen to all sides and decide on our policy proposals in terms of the recommendations in our report. So, Dennis, what have you to say? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. As indicated, I have extreme challenges with connectivity today. I've managed to listen quite well.
Yes, but we can hear you. We can hear you.
I hope you can hear me. It's great. Yeah, look, I think we've aerated the issues reasonably well today. I do take the various concerns raised by Kasatu, and I think once again Kasatu's raised some very good arguments, and they've argued them cogently. So I think that from Kasatu, from Outer, I think, and also from Psycho, the right issues are being raised and highlighted. I do think Treasury's responded, I think, as best they can. There are obviously political issues in the background which need to be aerated fully. And I think perhaps if we had the minister or the deputy minister on board, we might have had slightly better responses to the political positions, because I think that the Treasury team is, they're not in a position; they're administrators. So yeah, and really just to raise the issues that the district model is being raised consistently as the savior to all of the local government problems. And then you look at the districts, and the districts are in worse situations mostly than the locals. Just look at Sedi Beng's report that got released earlier on this week in Gauteng, which drew an even worse picture. The districts have been ignored for so long. They've been, kind of, sheltered employment almost, and there's no skills there, and it's not going to be the solution. But again, as the chair quite rightly states, that's an appropriations discussion, and it's also a political discussion, and perhaps not even for the Minister of Finance or his deputy, but more for COGTA. Chair, I don't have a lot to add, just to say that I really appreciate the fact that again we've had good submissions across the board. I think Treasury's done a reasonably good job in responding to them as best they could, and now it's up to the various different political parties to take these inputs back, caucus on them, and come up with a position. So yeah, that really is my input. Thank you, Chair.
Njadu, Njadu, your comments, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good Chair. Chair, I think one was following very closely the interaction between the stakeholders and National Treasury, which was very interested. And I think the interaction was also very effective as to prior to the previous interactions. So I think one would want to look at more looking at also the outstanding matters. When we look at terms of COSATU, there seemingly still matters that are outstanding in terms of matters which are still in court and all those things. So I think going forward for the February budget, it will be very important that when we move going forward, that we look in terms of what approach one can take in terms of when submissions are being made to deal with the issues in terms of more effective and efficient, so that we don't repeat the same issues next year. So I think, Chair, that would be my input. Thank you very much. Chair, are you there? Hello, Chairperson?
Yes, I'm very much here. No, I'm very much here. It's just that I have to engage with somebody else about the process of this meeting. Yeah.
Okay,
no, that's
okay,
fine. If anybody else would like to comment? No. All right. Can I quickly comment while Nokolo joins us in a few minutes? So firstly, Gila, as I said repeatedly, we're empathetic, we're sympathetic, we broadly support you and your cause. It's our cause, actually, of the majority. But it's a matter of trade-offs and so on. So to some extent, what you're raising, well, to a large extent, what you're raising is a tax issue, but it's inevitably related to expenditure because it's a trade-offs matter between, a whole lot of considerations. And also, we have to get a report back from NEDLAC. So perhaps in our report, we can put that down. And the committee can vote on a recommendation to that effect when they get the text. But something like this, Zakele and Esther, that the committee is broadly sympathetic with Gila, but recognize the trade-offs and think this matter must be discussed in a specific sitting where, we can look at 3 or 4 issues. And this can be one of them, because we can't resolve that issue now and in time for our fiscal framework report. But we need a better response from Treasury than we've got until now. Secondly, on the cars issue, I think that's clear. We should also put that in our report. And the NA committee needs to please follow up on that. On the matter of Mr. Shishi, on the matter of economic growth forecasts. Well, I hear you, but the fact of the matter is that for many, many years, you've been getting it wrong. Obviously, you need to be less certain now than ever, as indeed do I and everybody else, that, with the volatility, uncertainty, the thousands of imponderables, nobody can know exactly, but we have to have some reasonable forecast. For what it's worth, Edgar, I think, maybe I've got it wrong, that the SARB gets it correct, at least more accurate than National Treasury. I think they're at down minus 8.2 and you're at minus 7.8. So for what it's worth, personally, I'm speaking now as an individual, not as a chair. I tend to sort of think the SARB gets it more accurately. However, one hopes that you're right. And I know what you're going to say, that you go through a complex process and all that. But our two committees have over the years, more recently at least, around 2018, I think 2019, we made that observation in our report, I think. Then on the issue of what's happened to the public procurement bill, DG, the co-chair, Mr. Maswangani, last week also raised it when the minister was here. Dennis, I don't know whether I can agree with you that they're administrators. I think they have administrators. They are officials. They have a big say on policy. They don't have the final say. It's the ministers, the politicians that do, but they have a very big say. And I don't think he meant it in the literal sense, presumably, but I can't speak for you. So anyway, DG, I don't think you're an administrator. And really, on the public procurement bill, can you answer? What's holding it up? Why, given its importance? You came to us, I think Momo must have mentioned this in 2017, or was it 2016, when we had the financial sector regulation bill before us, DG. I don't know that I've got the dates right. It doesn't matter. It's not a here nor there. Public procurement bill. Is it true you won't get it processed through the parliamentary system for quite a while yet? And if so, what? If you can't answer, can you get the minister to answer, because the chairperson from the NA is also raising it privately. Then on the issue of, we all have to tackle corruption, as I'm sure you agree, Comrade Matthew. Let's start with our parliament. Are we doing enough? We can hold the executive to account. You're absolutely right. One doesn't see significant advances every time Treasury reports on corruption, but they will tell you, as you will yourself know, that it's not just their baby, as it were. Well, baby is the wrong term, but it's not just for them. The whole of government, civil society, the very actors that are presenting submissions here. And what about us as parliament? We're not doing enough. Then the issue of IMFs, we're tired of raising this. The minister completely misunderstood what is being said, and he was absolutely wrong. I think we should just put it back in our report. I, in fact, spoke to the chairperson this morning. We agree. So the other thing we want to reassert is our view that dealing with illicit financial flows, as Treasury itself said to us in 2017, they do what they can, but then the hawks and the NPA and so on don't come to the party, as it were. So our view that it's a multidisciplinary approach, as they themselves in the executive agree with interdepartmental structure. If you have an interdepartmental structure, colleagues, you're going to have some coordinating political structure to ensure something happens. So they need to meet at least 4 times a year. So can we repeat that point and hold by it? And the minister must account to Parliament for that. On the matter of the ports being very vulnerable, now on this one, we really need a separate discussion, Matthew. You're right. There's not much progress. I know it's difficult. We need to bring everybody together. And I think the 2 committees, can you note that Inkul, Alan, Esther, and Zakele. Then I also agree with you, Matthew, about the sequencing of recovery. On the wage bill, you can hear both sides. But I'm struck, by the way, by Sharon's point, for what it's worth, that actually, presumably if government loses in the court, then presumably they will engage with the unions, and presumably the outcome of that will shape decision making. But from what I can tell, government steadfast on this. They're not going to budge. For Parliament, it's not for us to become mediators and negotiators. The Labour legislation dispensation deals with that. And even in our own party, we'll obviously differ on how to manage that. But we can only stress again that this matter should be looked at by the Appropriations Committee colleagues. And in fact, we would urge negotiations and compromise on all sides. On the SABC, I think the Portfolio Committee and Communications will express the same view as you do, Matthew, that in fact, it is worrying that the public broadcaster has not got any money. Not that the public broadcaster doesn't have to do more to warrant getting that money, but that's an appropriations matter that I think Treasury must be required to respond to, and we're alerting you now, TG, when you appear before the Appropriations Committee. If nobody else raises it, and I'm sure they will, I will. On the loan guarantee scheme, I hear you, Momo, but I think the issue is quite complex. There's a lot of unhappiness support. On the wage bill also, colleagues, we have to be fair. If we're talking about those of us who argue that the wage bill has to be brought down and so on, we also have to be fair and ask, what are we as MPs going to do about our wage bill? Then something about the water board's crisis, we need to observe that that matter is also an appropriations matter, but as a committee, we can recommend that consideration be given to a full discussion on this, because the financial implications are horrific, as the minister has implied. Now, having said that, is there anybody else in Pululeko who wants to speak? Is there anybody on my list here?
Yes, Chair. I've got Mr. Abrahams.
Sorry, you got Mr. Meekin. Yeah, we'll come back to you, Mr. Meekin. We saw what you said in chat, but right now the MPs have to engage first. We've given everybody, we will never resolve all the issues, colleagues from civil society. The aim is to encourage a dialogue. Some of these are ongoing issues. This is MTBPS. The budget will take these issues up more. There will be offline exchanges as well. There will be a written report. So we have to take all that into account, Mr. Meekin. We'll come back to you. But for now, can we deal with members? Any members got anything else to add?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Oh, you're back, right? Okay, so can you call? Can you? So this is, you've been connected all the time. I'll step back.
No,
I've also raised all my issues. Sorry, yes,
okay.
Yes, my friend.
No, I just want to raise. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to raise some issues. I am not completely
please do.
Chair. The problem. Okay.
No, I know
am
your
not
problem. Okay,
completely
yeah,
Okay,
please,
sure.
please. Yeah.
No, the first thing for me, Chair, is that the fiscal position has not been expansionary since the introduction of the fiscal consolidation in 2013. The increase has been because of debt payments and not expansion. Can Treasury comment on that? Because that is what I want to raise first and foremost. But secondly, Chair, moving away from consumption expenditure will impact on the Human Development Index. I'd like to have Treasury making a take on that as well. Lastly, Chair, for me, there's just no mention of shifting more money into the economy and making the cost of capital less expensive by maybe changing the monetary policy. Now, Chair, if I may, the ANC did indicate that fiscal and monetary policy must be worked together, not apart. Can they comment on those, Chair? Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, Nicole. So you're saying you can't coach him because of the poor signal you've got? Is that right? You're not taking over right now?
No, I'm not taking over. Chair, it will be a risk because I'm rushing to a meeting. I'm on the way.
Okay, all right, fine. Then, all right, I'll just do it because we are. Njadu, do you want to take over? Njadu, do you want to chair from here, please?
Okay, Chair.
Yeah, just one or two reminders. Mr. Meekin wants to come in. I think we should give him a few minutes towards the end, but National Treasury needs to look at the chat group, Chair. You'll see there. And it's not a matter we can fully resolve here. They can exchange offline, but give us copies of all the exchanges. But that's the only other matter. Mr. Meekin wants to come in. I think he should be allowed to, and one or two people. Thank you very much. I'm done. I'm in the meeting, but I'll come in if I have to towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I think we are very close to the last comments of the meeting. Can we get the last part that was raised by Honorable Karim, who had to come in? The last.
Mr. Meekin, Mr. Njatu.
Okay, Mr. Meekin, can you come in? You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to correct something here. I was accused of misleading you about misleading the committee about what was said and written down in that 2018 MTBPS. And I've written on the notes here on the chat show exactly what was said at that and published about that 2018 MTBS. It was said that I was I was misleading you, and I haven't misled you. It's Mr. Monbet who has misled you, and I want to know how I can get to the bottom of this. It's a very, very important matter. We've got to. There's a suggestion that income taxes are fully against the Constitution, and doesn't seem to be any recognition of that. Not even a sort of discussion. It's just, oh well, it's a difficult thing to bring in. Well, I do want to ask you, sir, what we can do about this. This is a standoff now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Megan. Can we get any response on Mr. Megan?
Well, I've written it on the chat.
Oh, you written on the chat?
Yeah, I've written. Mr. Mohammed said I was misleading your committee, but it's actually, in fact, it's Mr. Mohammed who is misleading your committee. And what I've done on the chat is to just say I've written it down exactly what was said, was exactly what Mr. Mbawini said in his 201 MTBPS. And I mean, why have you ever thought it to yourself? Have you ever thought to why I go out to work, I work hard and I invest hard, and then somebody takes it away from me? Somebody takes it's probably theft. I mean, these are fundamental issues which are not helping our recovery. I can promise you that. So, what can I do? I mean, how can we resolve this matter with Mr. Mondiat or Moniat?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bigan. Okay, Mr. Bigan, the matter was raised on the chat. And then you say Mr. Monge was
Mr.
raising the
Momoniat.
matter.
Yes, Momoniat, yes.
Okay, is Mr. Monge in the meeting?
It's
No,
normal.
Chair, I can come in, Chair. I can come in, Chair. Chair, look, I haven't said anyone is misleading. I don't think I use those words. But what I'm saying is, you know, Mr. Meekan's interpretation, and I haven't been able to look at what he's saying, but I mean, the minister has never said he's going to review the income tax and the entire tax system. What I'm saying is we do have fundamental differences with him, and it's a big policy issue. It will affect the entire revenue of government. It's his view that it's unconstitutional, not ours. So it's for him then to take the steps that he needs to take if he believes it's unconstitutional. And I was just trying to point out to the committee that what he's asking for are very fundamental changes. And firstly, they've not been accepted by the Davis Tax Committee. And secondly, you know, it would require a big tax commission to go into the kind of changes that he wants. So I'm saying that we can look at small changes to the land tax and so on, but to do so at the cost of your income tax or other taxes is really not on the table at all. And, you know, we don't want to waste the time of the committee by saying that we're considering overhauling the entire tax system. We're not.
Well, I don't know why I've been bothering to come.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Momo. Mr. Megan, I think to avoid a dialogue, I think in terms of the response from Mr. Momo is that he now say that it was not his intention what he was saying on the chat. So can we maybe look at this matter to resolve it maybe offline, if so to say that we clear it for this meeting, and then we deal with the clarity of the matter offline, so that we don't have a dialogue maybe that will not really make or maybe have an impact on the meeting. Can we deal it with in that manner?
Yes, I'm quite happy to do that. But what specifically are you saying, sir? You say we must deal with it offline. How do you want to progress that? I don't agree that it's difficult. I mean, it's not. Singapore are doing it right now. They're changing from taxes on what people do on the land to taxes on the land. It's in progress. So it's not something that's never been done before, and it's something which I think, okay, I think it's against the Constitution. And if Mr. Monroe is saying, well, we don't, and therefore we'll see you in the Constitutional Court, then so be it. But that's not why I came to this meeting.
Okay, I think okay. Honorable Nokolo, thanks.
Chairman, let's just explain to Mr. Nieken that by offline you meant that it will be dealt with outside of the meeting. For now, I think it's an opportunity to give National Treasury to respond to other matters. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson, okay. Can I make a point, Chairperson?
Okay, if we come in, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Meekin.
Thank you, Honorable Gibbons.
Mr. Meekin, with due respect, we cannot give over attention to a single stakeholder. This parliament belongs, as we said, to everybody.
Yes,
but at the same time, it also belongs to other people.
I'm sorry, but somebody corrected me, and
that's fine. So
can we give to Honorable Karim just to
sorry.
Chairperson, can you ask Mr. Meekin to observe the decorum?
Yes,
with due respect, he's an elderly person. I have enormous respect for him. Can I also say, Can I also say, Chairperson, I agree with Mr. Momanyat. It is remarkable that Mr. Meekin feels so strongly that he has been persisting with this point of view for many years. Those of us who served in the local government committee at the time will remember that he participated fully in the property rates bill. He would sit till 10 and 11 at night because we had to finish that bill in time for the elections. And Mr. Meekin was there 100% of the time. His attendance, frankly, was even better than the average ANC member or any member of any other party. So we appreciate that. And he's admirable. He's got an ideological point of view that should be heard. No problem. But at the same time, we cannot continue dealing with the same issue. So what you have suggested, Chairperson, is exactly what has been suggested earlier, which is, this is it, Mr. Meekin. When we mean offline, we mean the matters come to us. It won't be discussed here because we're running out of time. For example, COSATU represents, Mr. Meekin, 1.8 million or something workers. We can't just ignore them also. So everybody gets the same amount of time, more or less. So the parliament's being very fair, Mr. Meekin. The parliament belongs as much to you as it belongs to COSATU. That's what a popular democracy is. And we appreciate that you take parliament so seriously. But it is an ideological issue. Mr. Momanyat is right, Mr. Meekin. I have also discussed this with you previously. It will mean overhauling the entire system. He's right to say, Chairperson, the matter should go to the Davis Commission, which in fact has done. What Mr. Meekin is right to say, that I think now, DG, I think the committee chairperson, as we said earlier, the DG and Momanyat have to reply to Mr. Meekin and give us a copy of the letter. They can't do the full reply before the Tuesday fiscal framework report, but we can give them 2 weeks to sort this matter out. Once the matter is dealt with, the committee chairs will meet and decide whether we're going to allow this discussion to occur in this forum again, so that Mr. Meekin gets a full hearing. He's correct to say that it may be understood that Mr. Momanyat told the meeting that he was misleading the meeting. Mr. Momanyat explained that he wasn't saying that. So that has been settled, Chairperson. As a Chairperson, you did very well in bringing both parties together. We can't do more. Mr. Chairperson, can I suggest we move on now? Mr. Meekin, I ask you to respect the parliamentary process I'm due. Mr. Momanyat, I ask you to recognize Parliament as the right, DG, yourself, to give replies to people, whether we agree or disagree. Thank you, Chairperson. I would strongly suggest we move on.
Thank you, Karim. I think we'll close this matter on that point, and then you have clarified also the processing. So I think let's take it from there, and then we close that point. Is there any points from National Treasury?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Dr. Peters would like to come in on one point around the forecast. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, DG. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, honourable members. I just wanted to come in on the one point made by Honourable Karim around the forecast. The Parliamentary Budget Office did release a report earlier this year, in March this year, where they did demonstrate that the National Treasury forecast along several horizons is in fact better than the forecast of the Reserve Bank. So I think certainly the Parliamentary Budget Office's own work has demonstrated that, and I think it's perhaps useful for us to engage with the Parliament on that work in greater detail. So I just wanted to correct that specific point. But I think also to say, I think Honorable Karim is absolutely correct. I think forecasters need to be, and I think Edgar made this point as well, in general, forecasters need to be very humble about their forecasts, but especially now because of the amount of uncertainty we are dealing with. And I think we certainly view our forecast in that light, and we certainly do regular comparisons of our work, both in terms of the process by which our forecast is generated, as well as the outcomes generated by our forecast. So I just thought that I'd respond to that specific point around the macroeconomic forecasts of the Reserve Bank being better than those of the National Treasury. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson. Any further comments? National Treasury once more. Any further comments? Did you? Yes, okay. We come in.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
There was a very specific question from Honorable Abraham with respect to the fiscal policy stance historically. If I understood the question, it was along the lines that, have we really been on an expansionary path? Is it not because of the debt service cost that the deficit has risen? I'm going to reshare the slide that was part of the presentation that we're tabling today, which is slide number 5, in response to Honorable Abraham. The graph on the left is a reflection of what we call the primary balance averaged out over the last 10 years. The primary balance excludes debt service costs. So the primary balance is specifically meant to answer the question that Honorable Abraham is asking, which is our stance truly expansionary or not? And so the part of the way you do that is, and there are other methodologies in this regard, and I know many of my colleagues can talk to them for a long time, but for the simple explanation with respect to this question is you exclude the debt service costs, and then you say, excluding the debt service costs, how am I doing? And it's very clear, if you look at this slide and this graph, that South Africa's fiscal position and fiscal stance has definitely been expansionary over the last decade. If you look, we've been in negative territory on our primary balance for a while. The key thing in this regard is also we're not going to comment on the monetary policy stance, but what we can say on the issue of coordination is that there is a considerable amount of coordination between, we work quite closely and meet regularly with the Reserve Bank, but there is a lot of coordination in terms of how we think about helping one another in this regard, including with respect to the Reserve Bank's price stability mandate. And we consider that a fiscal policy stance that is fundamentally based on stability, which is what we are proposing in this MTBPS, as opposed to the debt buildup that we have been doing over the last number of years, is precisely what monetary policy needs in order to achieve its objective in a manner that does not cause harm, especially to poor consumers. And so we consider that this is the case. But I think this answers the question, Honorable Abrams, with respect to whether we've been expansionary. We've definitely been expansionary. There's no question about it. And on the right-hand side, you can see that the projected increase in debt in South Africa is higher than our peer countries. Indeed, it's higher than some very large countries such as the People's Republic of China. And just in closing, we consider that these are the numbers, Honorable Chair, that, you know, with respect to the point about, you know, stimulus versus austerity, this is the point that we have been asking, which is, if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, it raises the question. If in fact you have, and we don't consider that a response has been given in this regard, we have been on an expansionary path. And that expansionary path has not produced economic growth. It's a fact. It's not an ideological position, it's in the numbers. And the question still remains, why will something which didn't work for 10 years work now? And we consider that that point is still on, is still something that is there before us and must inform our approach to fiscal policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sishi. Any further comments from National Treasury? If not, any further comments from the members?
Can you please note me, Chairperson?
You are noted, Honorable Shivambu.
Look, I think what the speaker who just spoke now saying is absolute rubbish, to say that the expansionary budget doesn't contribute to the GDP. Just look at the basic numbers, that government expenditure, when you later on count it in as GDP, as the national income, has been higher, and when you reduce expenditure, it will affect the GDP numbers. It's as basic logic as that. So what is difficult about that? You've got your own ideological commitment to austerity. So to want to argue and claim to be science that government expenditure doesn't contribute to growth, it's absolute rubbish. It's a neoliberal rubbish that you want to justify your own convictions. And that is not the case in the manner that it is. And of course, there has to be change in the micro components of the management of the economy, in terms of on what areas do you direct expenditure on. That is why we speak about procurement that focuses and prioritizes localization. And that is what we must be talking about, that what do we do about the localization component of ensuring what FFC was saying in their submission, that let us focus on localization so that whatever government expends on procurement is money which ultimately will contribute much more significantly to growth of the economy domestically. But to want to overall present as scientific knowledge that government expenditure that has never contributed to growth, it's absolute rubbish. It's better left with an impression that what this guy is saying is correct. It's not correct, it's false.
Okay, okay, Honorable Shivambu, I don't know whether there will be any response to the remarks made. Are there any response to that? If not, then further to the members, any other member, any points from the members? Okay. Yeah, I think with the absence of any other
Chairperson.
Okay, Honorable Karim.
Yeah. Can I just suggest that the colleagues think about what goes into the report? I think the National Assembly chairperson will be coordinating the report, but you know, we need some guidance. So, firstly, just to remind members, Comrade Chair, that we to remind the stakeholders, that the system is encouraged, that the stakeholders themselves, having heard the inputs from Treasury, as incomplete as they were, should by 5 o'clock today give us a page where they set out their position, so we can record what they're saying as far as possible in their own words. Secondly, I think we agreed that we will once again raise with the presidency and the minister this time the issue of, excuse me, the car story, as I call it, that has to be put on the agenda. Then I had made other proposals, and I will over the weekend, But I also think that we should agree, Chairperson, that the debate between FFC, PBO, and National Treasury needs to be addressed in a specific sitting, which should involve all four committees, Chairperson. I had exchange with the NA Chairperson, Comrade Makola, this morning, and I think you will hear from him too. We need two or three discussions between now and the budget. I don't know how we're going to fit it in February. We could even meet early in January around these major policy and strategic issues, because we talk past each other very often, Chairperson. And I think that should be put even in the report, but I'll leave it to the people putting the report together as a draft in the first instance to raise that. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karim. Nkululeko, I believe that all the way forward in terms of outlined by Honorable Karim is being captured in preparation of the report.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I think we have come to the end of our meeting, I think, which was a very fruitful meeting, very robust engagements, and also with the aim that we look in terms of how we're going to move forward and in the interest of all South Africans. Let me use this opportunity to thank all stakeholders and also to thank National Treasury team and all members for all contributions, inputs made. And I think then without on that note, that we have come to the end of our meeting, then the meeting is formally adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you to the members of civil society and the public for your submissions.
Thank you.